So I hope I can get through this. I've talked to a lot of people about Dick over the years. I have a perfect record of not being able to withhold my emotions. So I hope I can do it here because he deserves it. So Thursday afternoon, Jason Stark contacts me and says, I'd like to talk to you about the weekend. So I get on the phone with Jason, and he says, you know, John, somehow this feels different for us than all the other inductions. And I said, yeah, I think you're right, Jason. And he said, it feels much more personal than the others. And I said, I agree with you. And over the course of almost an hour and a half conversation with a lot of probing questions and thought-provoking questions that Jason throws at you, I kind of worked some things out of my mind, and over the next 48 hours, it's kind of solidified. And here's what I've come to here's why I think Jason is right. The Hall of Fame celebrates world-class, elite baseball players. And they have, and some of them are historically great, like this guy over here. They all have amazing statistics, and we're going to hear all about them tomorrow. Dick has amazing statistics, but Dick's candidacy for the Hall of Fame over the last 40 years, or near 40 years, hasn't foundered on the question of whether his performance on the field was good enough to warrant his admission. It foundered on the question of his character. And character is the essence of a human being. And it's exactly why Jason was right. It's incredibly personal this time around. It's my 7th induction, and it's very different because of that reason. So as I thought about this weekend, and I thought about Dick's character, there's 4 words that keep coming back to me: redemption, absolution, vindication, and gratitude. So we all know Dick's tortured past when he came into Philadelphia. But there are a couple of things I'd like to just talk about, because I was there one of the many days with my father when a Coke bottle nearly hit my father and me in the head and instead landed about 2 feet from Dick. And there are countless times he went home at night. And the thing that you need to remember is there was no safe place for Dick back then. He wasn't safe in the clubhouse because his teammates, some of his teammates, made racial slurs and racial epithets at him. He wasn't safe on the practice field because people, like Frank Thomas, hit him with a bat. He wasn't safe during the game because people were throwing Coke bottles and other things at him. And if he went home, when he went home, he had hate mail. He had people dumping trash in his front yard. He had cars doing donuts in his front yard. He had threatening phone calls. And he even had some bozo throwing a rock through his living room window and nearly hitting Terry. Literally no safe place. And when all these people over the last decades had talked to me about Dick and his personality, his attitude, and his, I would look at him and say, I would describe, this is what he went through. And how long do you think you could endure that and not snap and not lash out? Now, the usual response is just kind of a blank stare at me as if, like, I can't possibly respond to that. Occasionally, I would get somebody who would say, okay, I processed this, and they would look at me and say, I never thought of it that way. But that's the problem that we need to kind of confront here. So when we retired Dick's jersey, Mike Schmidt made a comment about Dick in terms of the problems that he faced over the years. He said, quote, Dick rebelled, and he became labeled as a bad teammate, a troublemaker. Those labels have kept Dick Allen out of the Hall of Fame. So when you think about Dick, you need to know, and I was really privileged over the last 26 years or so of his life to be an owner and to be able to spend time and talk to him and get to know him. One of the things that amazed me about Dick early on that I learned about him is that he spent his time after he retired going around the country talking to people, asking for forgiveness for what he did, and offering them forgiveness for what he did and his reaction to them. And that is exactly what redemption is about. It's an atonement for your transgressions, but it's forgiveness too for the people who transgress against you. So when this is probably a little too much detail, but since we're all dearly attached to this man, I want to take you back to March of 2020, spring training. It's the beginning. COVID's kind of out there, but the world hasn't shut down yet. And Mike Tolan is at Clearwater, and he sees me at a game, and he says, "I'd like to talk to you." So he comes up to my office after the game, and he talks, and he says, "I want you to understand where Dick is." He said, "Dick has cancer. We don't know how long he's going to live, how it's going to play out." And he said, "I'd like you to think about retiring Dick's jersey sooner rather than later." And within 20 minutes, we had mapped out a plan to do just that. And when I made that decision to retire Dick's jersey prior to getting elected into the Hall of Fame, it was a break with what was the Phillies policy. And when I made that decision, I was pretty confident that I was doing something good for Dick, something that was important to Dick and his family. But I also thought I was doing something important for the organization, for our fans, and indeed for the city of Philadelphia. What I did not expect, what I don't, sorry, what I don't think I could have ever anticipated is what Dick did for us that day. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to read to you what he said. "As I stand here today in this city, on this field, I can't help but be humbled. This is an honor of a lifetime. I will never forget this day. First of all, Mama taught us all to start with God. All things are possible through him. Without him, none of this matters. I am proud to be a member of the Philadelphia Phillies family. This is not simply a baseball team." And he closed by saying, "I want to salute the many great fans who supported me during my career. You always believed in me, and I am forever grateful. I hope that I proved I belonged." So, what Dick did in the 5 minutes he spoke was he gave everyone absolution. He absolved us from what we did to not help him, did not do enough to help him. He absolved the organization, he absolved the fans, he absolved the entire city. Now, Mike's words about the labels keeping Dick out, I believe is true, and I've talked to enough other people in the hall that they agree too. But if you think about it, the fact that those labels kept Dick out of the Hall of Fame, it stands to reason that when this year's committee voted him in, what they did was they looked at those labels very differently. They understood them in the context that I tried to lay out at the beginning of my talk. And they did not deny what Dick did during his playing days, but they acknowledged what he did in his post-playing days, in his retirement, to make atonement, to try to be redeemed. And ultimately, by voting Dick in, they have vindicated Dick. And that's the other main thought I have here, which makes me very grateful for what's happening. I am grateful to the Hall of Fame. I'm grateful to the board of directors who put Dick on the ballot and gave him another chance. I am grateful to the committee who voted him in. Would I love to have Dick standing here next to me today? Of course I would. But the fact that he's not here doesn't diminish my gratitude one iota. Much more important, however, than my gratitude and my feelings are what Dick would have thought. And I'd like to talk to you about a couple of things here, because I am absolutely convinced that if Dick were standing here, he would say the same things tonight that he said to us 5 years ago at Citizens Bank Park when he retired his jersey. That day, I'll remind you, he thanked the city, he thanked the fans, he thanked the organization, and he said he was grateful and humbled. That's a man who is at peace with himself and at peace with what he's accomplished in his life. And I know that Dick would be here, he too would be grateful to the Hall of Fame for this honor that they bestowed upon him. For my entire life, I have listened to multiple pastors talk about and extol the virtues of Christian love. I have never met a person in my life who personifies those virtues better than Dick Allen. He's a real-life Jean Valjean. Jean Valjean is the protagonist in Victor Hugo's mid-19th century novel, Les Miserables, and if you're not familiar with the novel, you may be familiar with the 2012 movie that starred Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe. But Valjean had a tortured, he was destitute. He stole a loaf of bread to feed his sister's family. He was in prison for like 19 years, and when he came out, he was given a yellow passport just to make sure that everybody knew he was a convict, and he was a person of low character. In the course of the novel, a bishop befriends him, learns about his tortured past, and says to him, let me see if I can get this. If you emerge from that sad place, referencing Valjean's prior life, with thoughts of hatred and of wrath against mankind, you are deserving of pity. If you emerge with thoughts of goodwill and of peace, you are more worthy than any of us. And that's exactly what Dick did. He emerged from his sad place of his life as a baseball player, and he emerged with goodwill and peace. There was no recrimination, no bitterness, no vindictiveness, no retribution, just love, forgiveness, and grace. And for me, that is the final word about Dick's character. Thank you.